Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site. Bettingangle.us, a free site. Let's talk about the fight that seems to have caused a lot of controversy. Right? Champion Carlos Adames against Hamzah Sheeraz. Right? One judge has it 118, 110. Many of you can't understand how this fight was even called a draw. If you look at just the judges' scorecards, right? One judge has Sheeraz winning by 1 round. Another judge has it a draw, right? The last judge, 8-round difference. Let's talk about that fight because you have raised that fight in the comment section of the earlier video, which wasn't even on the fight, right? You have expressed concerns. So let's talk about it. I'll explain myself, right? I thought Sheeraz won the fight. Let's talk about it, but first remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now let me just say, in boxing, a round's a round. We call the last 3 rounds the championship rounds. Right? But just understand, if I win the first round, that should count as much as any of the championship rounds. The championship rounds matter in close fights. Buddy McGirt talking to an exhausted Callum Smith in a scene that really belongs in a movie before the 12th round. Reminds his fighter that this is a championship round. Okay, I get it. But if I beat you in the non-championship rounds, the fight's mine. Even folks like me who believe that you have to beat the champ to take his title could look at a fight like Sheeraz. Adames is the champ going into the fight, and reach the conclusion that that's exactly what Sheeraz did. I'm a little surprised by the draw scorecard. I'm a little surprised that no judge had Sheeraz winning by 2 or more rounds. So, what I want people to do, and I can't post the video for copyright reasons, but what I want you to do is to listen to the announcer at the end of the 4th round. Right? You're a third of the fight in. Importantly, at the end of 4 rounds, understand, if one guy's ahead, then they would have to be ahead by 2 rounds if you're not scoring rounds as draws. Right? Otherwise, since it's an even number of rounds, it would be 2-2. Now, at the end of the 4th round, and I thought Sheeraz dominated the beginning of the fight. Dominated it. The announcer on British TV says, with regard to Sheeraz, no nerves, and winning this fight so far. Right, folks, the question at the end of 4 rounds is a simple one. Is Sheeraz up 3-1? Which would mean that he's up by 2 rounds, a third of the fight in. Right? Understand what 3-1 would further mean. You have 8 rounds left. Right? 8. If Sheeraz wins less than 50% of the 8 rounds, if he wins 3 of the 8 rounds, that's a draw. Right? Even if you believe that Adames' front foot wears down Sheeraz, even if you believe that. If Sheeraz wins 3 of the last 8, if he's up 3-1 at the end of 4, then the fight's a draw. Now, this fight has some interesting dynamics here. Let me just say, too, I thought Sheeraz sweeps the first 4 rounds. If you believe he sweeps the first 4 rounds, all he needs is 2 of the last 8 to earn a draw. Right? And I thought Sheeraz did better than that. Now, this fight has some interesting dynamics. You tell me here. We've all watched Carlos Adames in the past. He gets warned in the 8th round. The 8th round. For low blows. Now, if you're Carlos Adames, and if you're winning by the margin that the critics believe he's winning by, right? It's as if they picked up the fight in the 5th round, right? Why would the champion be throwing low blows in the 8th round? Right? Why would he? Let me also say, too, that I need for folks to look at the film of that 8th round. Folks, Adames throws at least 3 low blows before he's even warned about low blows in the 8th round. Right, folks? To me, this looked like Felix Trinidad out of desperation throwing low blows on Fernando Vargas. I don't want to sound like too much of an OG here. But understand, Carlos Adames has no reason to throw low blows if he's in a fight that he ultimately is going to win by 8 rounds, which is what the 118-110 judge had it. Right? And of course, how he could win by 8 rounds after losing the first 4 is an impossibility, isn't it? So, I'll just put it to you this way, and I know the CompuBox numbers show Adames landing many more power shots than Sheeraz. I also believe in reading the bruising after a fight. Right? Sheeraz is red, busted up around his eye. Clearly, the champion's landing some shots. I'm not saying this is a one-way street. Clearly, he's landing some shots. But folks, the challenger, Sheeraz, is dominating the jab numbers. Carlos Adames has the same problem that Arthur Beterbiev had in another fight on the card, where Adames could not be effective on his back foot. He had to try to walk down and walk through a mobile jabber's jab. Let me also say that Sheeraz is inverted. You understand that the CompuBox numbers for an inverted fighter are deceptive, because you have a category for jabs, then you have a category for power punches. Right? What if Sheeraz's power punch is his jab? Folks, that's the dynamic you have here. You have a lefty battering the champ with his left hand, which, like De La Hoya, right, is up front, right? De La Hoya, I believe, was inverted. So, relook at the CompuBox numbers. Right? If Sheeraz is landing dozens, again, dozens, more jabs than Adames, right? Just understand he's landing dozens more power shots, because that's his power hand. CompuBox works if my jab's my non-dominant hand. Then the idea is, well, who landed the big punches? Right? It would be the guy landing hooks, right? That's a power shot. Right hands. Now, Sheeraz has a pretty good right hand. But again, his dominant hand is his left. Let's also be blunt here. Sheeraz's jab, and I understand, it's the day after the fight that people are criticizing him about. Sheeraz's jab is one of the best jabs in boxing. So I see Sheeraz. What's the punch he wants to land? Folks, it's the jab. And I see him landing that jab repeatedly. Right? He's moving. Adames can't find him. He's landing the jab repeatedly in the first 4 rounds of the fight. Right, folks? This is not a one-way fight. Sheeraz is doing exactly what he wants to do. Adames is being frustrated as a front foot heavy guy, and I understand. We're talking about Adames being ambidextrous, can come in righty, can come in lefty. Right? The bottom line is, righty or lefty, as he comes in, he's getting hit. So, I'll put it to you this way. The low blows he's throwing, folks, they're not as close as the punch Dubois landed on Usyk. Right, his low blows were clearly low. The person who would be impressed by them would be Hall of Famer Bernard Hopkins, because if you look at Adames, look at the low blows. He makes sure that the ref is away from where he's throwing the shot. Right? But I need for folks to understand, he's throwing multiple low blows in the 8th round if he's dominating the fight like they claim in the narrative, which of course ignores the fact that Sheeraz is inverted and is landing his best punch, his jab, with regularity, as reflected in the CompuBox numbers. Right? And those are power shots. Then understand, Adames wouldn't have to panic in the 8th round. He does, for a reason. Now, the people claiming that, and I'll use more diplomatic language than blank the bed. The people claiming that Sheeraz pissed on himself. Right? Their real argument is that you're the challenger, you get to the 11th round, and you understand there are people out there like me who believe you have to beat the champ to take his title. You're on the verge of beating the champ to take his title. Sheeraz takes his foot off the gas, or so it seems. I don't think we know the real story. Right, so the 11th and 12th rounds are tough rounds. Sheeraz doesn't fully close the show. He leaves enough on the table where the 12th round in particular, one judge scores the fight a draw. Right? Understand, Sheeraz has the fight in his grasp because the other judge has him winning the fight by a round. So Sheeraz, at the end of the fight, just needed a stronger finish and didn't get it. Now, Sheeraz, understand, I still thought he won the fight. Sheeraz is old school. You know old school guys. Right? There's a famous fight where Carmine Basilio, after a fight, had one eye blown up. And they said to him, "Can you see out of that eye?" And Basilio's response, my words, not his, was, "Doesn't matter. I still had my other eye." Right? That's old school. Guys aren't going to own up to injuries. Well, Frank Warren is talking about how Sheeraz was having hand problems. Right? Understand what we fans view as not closing the show. Right? The belt's on the line. You've done the work. Put the exclamation point at the end of the sentence here. In the 11th and 12th rounds, Sheeraz might well have had an injury he was dealing with. This is boxing. Right? A lot of guys have injuries. Right? So Sheeraz left enough room where Adames was able to save, one man's opinion, save his title by closing strong. right? But once you realize that Sheeraz is inverted, once you realize that you can't take the definition of a power shot in CompuBox for granted when you're dealing with an inverted fighter. Once you look at the first 4 rounds, and I know even the announcing team felt Adames looked good late, right? But understand, in real time, you can look at the film yourself. It's clear Sheeraz wins the first third of the fight. Again, if the announcer at the end of the 4th is saying no nerves, in other words, Sheeraz has skated the first 4 rounds. It's not blood and guts. This isn't Beterbiev Bivol, where Beterbiev is on his front foot constantly and Bivol has to operate in the first 4 rounds. These first 4 rounds weren't as close as those first 4 rounds. Right? Sheeraz is skating at the end of the 4th round. Again, no nerves. And winning the fight so far, if it's an even number of rounds, what does winning the fight so far mean? It means 3-1, 2-round lead at the end of 4. Right? So that blows up the 118-110 narrative. Or it means 4-0. Let's talk about some other topics, right? And tell us your thoughts in the comment section of this YouTube video. Again, just to understand, they're talking about Sheeraz's right hand during the fight. He's a southpaw. Let me make another point, too. If I'm Adames, right, I've just given Sheeraz his first draw. I also have taken a tough fight and survived it. Now, 160, folks, is interesting. I thought the top 2 fighters at 160 are Sheeraz and Zhang. Right now, Sheeraz, a southpaw with a jab, right, doesn't want to face, my opinion, right, this is how I see it, doesn't want to face a lefty. Because his inverted stance does better against righties. Now that's important because Zhanabek's a lefty. Erislandy Lara is a lefty. Right? So, of course, people are criticizing Sheeraz for fighting Carlos Adames. Right? They're saying, oh, he picked the easiest champion at 160. Well, first off, Adames is not that easy. I thought he won the fight he's supposed to have lost. Right? Revisit that fight. And the guy he fought went on to, win a title in a different weight class. Right? Well, I'll just say, matchmaking is an important part of boxing. If I have a southpaw who's fighting as a righty, why would I want to throw them in with Zhanabek? Why would I want to throw them in with Erislandy Lara? Lara, by the way, folks, he's a Hall of Famer today. You know what I mean. He'll be a Hall of Famer, right? Obviously, today's an active fighter. We don't give Hall of Fame designations to active fighters, right? But Lara gave Canelo one of his toughest fights, right? Beat Danny Garcia. Granted, it's Danny past his peak, but nonetheless, right? Danny has a case for the Hall of Fame, quite frankly, right? Not as strong as Lara does. Lara's in his 40s. Lara has changed his game where he's now a knockout puncher, right? His straight left, quietly, is one of the best punches, certainly among the over 40 crowd in the sport. Right? In other words, if Sheeraz decides to fight a southpaw, he's dealing with a future Hall of Famer in Lara. He's also dealing with the guy I call the boogeyman of the division. Zhanabek is underrated. Well, track the interviews of Virgil Ortiz. Right? Ortiz delivered for us. He beat Madrimov. Right? Ortiz now is talking about jumping up to 160. But folks, 160 has problematical people. Right? Another problematical person, Chris Eubank. I know Eubank's well into his 30s. Okay, fine. Right, folks? Eubank has only been dropped once. Right? That's that first Liam Smith fight. You saw the second fight, which was not close. Right? And Eubank is a guy who, let's just say, is a cagey vet. Right? He's been in fights. He's a tough out. Well, you put it all together. If I'm Carlos Adames, why would I fight Sheeraz again? Right? I would think to myself, I had problems the first third of the fight. I would think to myself, there seems to be an outcry that I was robbed. Good for me. Right? I've just been in a tough fight. People think I was robbed by a draw. Now I have political cover. Right? Adames isn't a southpaw fighting inverted. Right? If he fights Lara, he's going to view it as fighting a guy in his 40s. Right? Understand, that would be a unification match because Adames left the ring with his belt. Right? I personally think that Janabek's too dangerous for Carlos Adames. Keep a close eye on middleweight, folks. It's loaded. Notice Terence Crawford, and now Crawford's walking around in what? The high 170s, the low 180s. Right? You notice that Crawford on his way to Canelo, and keep in mind, Canelo is fighting in May, but not Crawford. Right? You notice Crawford jumped the middleweight division. Understand, Crawford thinks he can beat. Crawford himself, a southpaw, by the way, thinks he can beat Canelo. He might not think he can beat Janabek. He might not think he can beat Hamzah Sheeraz. Right? He doesn't have a fight scheduled for May. He's not venturing into 160, on his way to 168. Let's talk about Usyk. Now, a few of you feel that I'm picking on Usyk. Right? In every other video, I'm talking about a guy who I feel could give Usyk problems. Right? I plead guilty. Folks, Usyk's the top shelf of the heavyweight division. He not only has beaten Tyson Fury, and make no mistake, Fury is a historical heavyweight to me. He's one of the best heavyweights I've seen. He's past his peak right now. He doesn't match up well. Styles make fights. He doesn't match up well with Usyk. There's a coordination gap between the two men. Right? When Fury is the person who has the advantage in coordination, the fight's a done deal. Right? Think about how good Derek Chisora looked against Joe Joyce. Right? Against Otto Wallin. I thought Chisora looked good in both fights. Think about how bad he looked against Tyson Fury. Right? Well, just understand, Usyk's a tough matchup. He's a southpaw, and he's a better athlete than Tyson Fury. But I stand by my praise of Tyson Fury. Right? I think Fury was the best of his generation, quite frankly, until his fights against Usyk. Right? The answer to the question to me of Wilder, AJ, Fury, I'm talking about three guys who rule the roost, is Tyson Fury. Right? That's the way I see it. Well, let me just say, now we're in the Usyk era. Usyk's not just beating Fury, Usyk's beating Daniel Dubois. So if we're judging heavyweights, of course in boxing, you're going to look at a Joe Parker, right? Parker wants to fight for the title. I don't think Parker would object to fighting Usyk. We understand Usyk is a tougher out than Daniel Dubois, who I personally thought Parker was going to beat. I was expecting Martin Bakole to do better against Parker than he did. Now, I'm not quite sure what officially happened at the end of that Bakole fight. If it's a referee stoppage, if Bacole's corner didn't pull the plug, Bakole loses that fight. Because he gets hit on the top of the head, his balance is thrown, his legs short circuit. The ref is looking at him. The ref's an excellent ref. The ref's looking at him closely. Bakole then does some no-nos, doesn't he? He uses his hands to get up on the ropes. He doesn't get up on his own. Then the ref follows him. Now, the problem with alpha types is they just don't know how to respond after a knockdown. Right? You saw Anthony Joshua pick the knockdown, right? He gets knocked down by Vladimir Klitschko, and he's dead in the water. Not even throwing back a lot of punches. Right? Because he didn't really have experience getting knocked down. Then he gets knocked down by Andy Ruiz. There's a moment in that first fight where the ref says, "Come to me," and Joshua doesn't really move. Well, here, Martin Bakole does the worst thing possible. Look at the referee. The ref's looking at him. Bakole pulls himself up to his feet. Then Bakole, instead of look at the ref, right? Tyson Fury, first fight against Deontay Wilder, right? He's looking at Jack Reese, the referee. Instead of Bakole looking at the ref, keep in mind, folks, there's hardly any time in the round. Right? All Bakole has to do is convince the referee that he's ready to, sit on a stool for a minute before the next round. Right? All he has to do is convince the referee that he can answer questions, right? That when asked, "You want to continue," is going to say something other than, right? No, Bakole doesn't even look at the referee. This is where he loses the fight. Right? He's knocked down, he's confused, he's hurt, it's obvious. He has his back to the ref. Not only that, as he walks to his corner, he's holding the top rope. Well, just understand, Joe Parker has the mobility. And he can throw power shots. He can lead with power shots. Isn't that what he does with that overhand right? To give an Alexander Usyk problems. Why am I mentioning Usyk? It's not to pick on him. It's because the implicit question is, can Joe Parker be heavyweight champ again? Who's the champion? It's Alexander Usyk. Right? If you want me to talk about a guy Usyk beat, Daniel Dubois, okay, I can do that, but what's the point? When I see Ajit Kabayel become the mandatory for Usyk, what am I supposed to do? Talk about Kabayel against other people in the division? No, the question is, okay, this guy's the mandatory. How would he do against the top shelf, the guy he's a mandatory for? Right? So I get, and I'm pleased, that my crowd here online's a tough crowd. Right? To me, my crowd here online is the boxing hardcore. Right? But let's face it, you get a bunch of hardcore boxing fans in a room, we're going to have disagreements. So for me, I see Hamzah Sheeraz, whose best punch is his jab, because he's inverted, Southpaw throwing a straight left. Landing that left with regularity, yes, I thought he beat Carlos Adames. Right? Okay, 115, 114, and 114, 114. Okay, I can see that. Right? Adames closes stronger than Hamzah Sheeraz. Right? I don't think it's a courage thing. I think it's an injury thing. I think Sheeraz is old school. Right? If he had a closed eye, I think Sheeraz would be deflecting the question to talk about his open eye. Right? As for comparing fighters to Usyk, folks, that's part of the burden of being heavyweight champion. If this were the Mike Tyson era, we'd be comparing fighters to Tyson, wouldn't we? Let me make another point, too. The Kabayel Zhang fight. just understand, and I know I'm not alone with this. I know I'm not alone with this because all of us were watching Zhili Zhang's career, right? You saw him stop Joe Joyce twice. On the telecast, the head announcer says he thought Zhang beat Ergovic. Right? Joe Parker is big news in the sport right now. We understand Zhang knocks him down twice. I was stunned that Zhang was the underdog going into the fight. In other words, folks, there's another opinion out there. And this was the opinion that actually led the day at sportsbooks. There's a group out there who's in on Ajit Kabayel. He was the favorite, not Zhang. So understand, I admit to you, I didn't understand how Kabayel was the favorite. Why, I am shocked, and I mean shocked, that Zhang lost the fight. Just understand there's another group that's standing in line collecting. There's another group that looked at the odds that I looked at and said, I don't understand these odds. And they reached the opposite conclusion, the correct conclusion. Kabayel's the favorite, that sounds right to me. Right? I mean, because understand, this fight doesn't make it to the second half. Right? Let me also say, too, I know some folks are saying, hey, Kabayel's strategy was clearly to get Zhang to follow him, tire himself out, and then, of course, turn aggressive. I'm not sure if that's what happened. Because Kabayel's only on his back foot for the first round. Am I supposed to believe that Zhili Zhang is bone tired at the end of the first round? I don't think he is. I think he's bone tired at the end of the fight because he's been getting hit with some withering body shots. Now, I will say, Canelo is defensively blessed, right? It's very hard to find Canelo's head. Understand, Canelo has a short neck. He's shorter. He knows how to crouch, right? So when Canelo throws, that left hook to the body, which is one of the sport's best punches, right? That's the punch that pretty much ends the Kovalev fight. Right? Canelo comes across with the right hand, but you understand, Kovalev looks like he's about to go the distance before the left hook to the body. After the left hook to the body, Canelo could have just pushed Kovalev to the canvas. Right? Now, I understand Canelo's style of going to the body. Ajit Kabayel, who's shorter in today's heavyweight division, right? He's shorter than Zhang. Right? He wouldn't be shorter than Usyk. But I'm a bit amazed that Kabayel is able to throw combinations to the body. I'm surprised. I'm surprised in this heavyweight division that some guy isn't expecting Kabayel to throw a combination. Right? It seems to me that if I know you're going to throw a combination to the body, I'd be ready to hit you up top because your hands can't be two places at one time. Now, I've talked about Archie Moore and George Foreman, right? Understand how they did defense. Foreman goes to your body, but he has a hand wrapped around his head. So even if I know Foreman's going to the body, I have to find a way to hit him, right? With a hand around his head and it being hard to hit him on the other side of his head. Kabayel doesn't even do that. So it'll be interesting. My point with Usyk, too, is in this big clunky heavyweight era, he was able to move away from opponents, wasn't he? Right? When he's not pinned, he can move away. Kabayel has great legs, right? So does Joe Parker. These aren't the guys who frame their legs for the crowd. No, they're just using their legs as a tool. Right? So my point is simply, as Usyk, who's a great athlete, right? He's one of the best athletes in sport, in boxing, right? As Usyk moves away from Kabayel, and I thought Usyk was able to move away from Fury. My point is simply, Kabayel would be able to move with him. Right? Now, if Usyk throws down the kind of lateral movement, and it was impressive, that Hamzah Sheeraz threw down in the first 4 rounds of his fight against Carlos Adames, right? One wonders how Kabayel is going to be able to find his body. Right? Zhang is stationary in front of Kabayel. Right? I'm guessing an Usyk would be moving. So Kabayel might be able to move with him. But Kabayel might not be able to throw the combinations to the body on a moving target. Right? These are the questions we have to ask in assessing his chances of winning the heavyweight championship. And of course, he's the mandatory to Usyk, so we're going to talk about his chances in videos like we did the prior video against an Usyk. Right? Understand, I thought Usyk would have a successful heavyweight career. Go back through the videos when Usyk was a cruiserweight. Right? Usyk physically is taller than Sonny Liston was. And you looked at the heavyweight division, think about who ruled the roost back then. Right? Deontay Wilder, underdeveloped left hand, let's be blunt. Anthony Joshua, right? Big guy who would have a problem against more fluid opponents. Right? And Tyson Fury, who isn't as coordinated as Alexander Usyk. Right? So I've been a fan of Usyk's for years. I believe I took him in the Tony Bellew fight. Those videos should all be up. I'm not picking on Usyk because I think he is some occupier of the heavyweight title. No, he's first ballot Hall of Famer, hasn't lost as a pro, Olympic gold medalist, undisputed cruiserweight, undisputed at heavy. Right? Understand, him, Frank Sanchez, Ajit Kabayel are 3 of the most coordinated guys in terms of foot speed in the entire heavyweight division. Right? They're going up against bigger, clunkier heavyweights, the Martin Bacolis of the world. Right? Joe Parker also is one of the more mobile guys in the heavyweight division. Right? Here online, we're going to point out things like that when they appear in fights. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. Obviously, there's a lot left to discuss. Loaded card. Right? Riyadh season means several title fights on the same card. We'll try to talk about Buatsi, Callum Smith, Virgil Ortiz in much greater detail here. Other fallout to other weight classes, right? If I'm Beterbiev, who now is without a title, if I'm Beterbiev, I don't fight Bivol again. Trilogies tend to be brutal fights, right? Bo Holyfield, Ali Fraser, Thriller in Manila. Trilogies tend to be brutal fights. There's a structural problem that Beterbiev has, right? He's a front foot heavy fighter. Bivol has figured it out. Bivol's plan seems to have been to start fast for the second straight fight and then to rest a little bit. In rounds 4, 5, 6, people thought that he had injured his hand. Right? It's clear Bivol is making sure that down the home stretch he has more than in the first fight. If I'm Beterbiev, I might have to get creative. Gilberto Ramirez is talking about venturing into the heavyweight division. He's the unified cruiserweight champion. Right? If I'm Beterbiev with the punch I have, with guys who come to fight like Chris Billum-Smith, who's just waiting for the opportunity to get Ramirez out of the division, I would think about jumping to cruiser. But understand the risk involved. This is one of the holes in the sport of boxing. Light heavy's 175. Cruiser's 200. Right? You don't have anything in between. Beterbiev is going to go from outsized puncher at 40, at 175, to jumping in the water at 200 against guys who might hit harder than him. Folks, Chris Billum-Smith is a very hard puncher. Right? If he fights Bivol again, Bivol has his rhythm down. Bivol's back foot. Or rather, Bivol can be back foot. Right? Bivol knows how to defend Beterbiev, doesn't he? Right? Beterbiev might want to pivot and fight some of the others at 175. The problem is he's already fought Callum Smith. He's already fought Anthony Yarde. Right? He's going to face a challenge in finding guys who are highly thought of at 175 to fight. David Benavidez comes to mind. Right? Let's just say that would be a great fight. Right? My initial thought on that fight is that that would be a prop bet fight. Right? Two sluggers, both of whom don't have great back feet. Right? Benavidez is a savant. I believe Benavidez is the kind of guy who could look at the Bivol film for 5 minutes. I'm not kidding. And figure out how to defense Beterbiev. Right? That fight would be a in what round is the stoppage fight to me. Right? I don't know who wins it. Let's just say, though, those guys would be fighting in a phone booth. You wouldn't have the back foot that you had in this fight to make the fight go the distance. I thought Benavidez really did a number on his last opponent. Right? David Morrell took some huge shots to go the distance in that fight. Right? I understand Benavidez at 175 is, hasn't gotten a stoppage yet. I believe that has a lot to do with the quality of his opposition. Grovestick, who of course Beterbiev beat in an earlier fight, is one of the best at 175. He's the first person Benavidez fought. I thought if Morrell wasn't a young guy with the attitude of he's going to go the distance no matter what, I thought he would have been stopped by Benavidez. Right? But let's just say Beterbiev is running out of people to fight at 175. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.